The Kaleidoscope.
Hey, it's your girl Sarah right here on the Kaleidoscope. Now you're tuned into Relax Radio, and welcome to the final hour of my show. I'm super excited to keep you company for this last hour as well because I have a lot of interesting things to talk about during this as well. Now, if you really like some of the things we do, make sure you follow us on our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And if you have any questions, messages, thoughts, opinions you would like to share with us, make sure you text me on 078 and you can get in touch with me and I can share your thoughts and, opinions with everyone who's listening in as well. So, super excited to be here. But right now, we're going to be talking about whether we can actually forgive and forget. Now, this is something that I felt like we really needed to discuss simply because of the fact that we live in an age where it's very, very hard to forget things, especially when it's things we do on the internet. We tend to be called out a lot for it later on. Sometimes things we do as children tend to pop up when we're adults, and then eventually ruin our careers, ruin our lives. Because of the stuff we've done when we were children. So that is what I'll be talking about whether we can actually forgive and forget those things that we did as children. Why we need to sort of accept that and not necessarily penalize people so much for some of the things that they did when they were children, because of the fact that they were unaware or because of ignorance, right? So that's what we'll be talking about today. But um that is what it is. So, if we're going to talk about all these people that actually got called out for some of the things that happened in the past, we know that the internet is a very scary place. We know that some of the things we do will always be on the internet. So, that's why it's always very, very careful for us to think twice about what we post on the internet, because like I said, these things can resurface years later when you're in the position, or when you're doing something really important, when you have an important position, and it can really mess things up for you, because if you don't think twice about the things that you're posting on social media. And I mean, I can give a few examples of people who have been actually called out for some of the things they did when they were children. And one of the most recent people who were actually called out was Billie Eilish. But there's also other people like Justin Trudeau, or even Alexei McCammond, who were actually called out for some of the very racist, homophobic comments or remarks, or even actions they did when they were young, and when they were young, basically. But until so if we were to actually focus on the story of Alexei McCammond, until recently she was a rising star of journalism. She was very accomplished, and she was quite young for all the achievements that she had achieved, and she was a very accomplished person, right? But when some tweets that she had made a few years back resurfaced on the internet, that completely messed things up for her, because people started calling her out on her homophobia and her racism. And what needs to be kept in mind is the fact that she actually lost her job because of it. She lost the job that she had, and she had to completely cut herself out from that scene. She had to get away from it, just to make sure that she didn't keep getting threats and whatnot. So what we need to understand is, when we're talking about forgiving and forgetting, in which instances can we actually forgive and forget these things? In which instances is it completely unforgivable? And can we actually hold children accountable, or rather, can we actually hold children up to the standards of adults? Okay. So, like I said, we were talking about Alexei McCammond and how some of her tweets resurfaced, and some of these tweets that she tweeted actually were actually 10 years before she got the position she was. So by the time she was 27, and 10 years back was when she was 17. So at that time she was a teenager, and she's not the first person that has actually been called out for some of the things she's done as well. Now, Justin Trudeau was also accused of blackface and racism, and the internet has actually called all of them out, and have made them apologize. But how far is too far, and can we actually forgive and forget? Now, that's a question that is that on our minds as well, because there are so many questions. Like, okay, some of them were actually children when they did what they did. And they were ignorant, they were unaware. But does that mean that we can penalize them now for the actions that happened some time back? What if these people have actually made a change? What if some of these people have actually become more concerned about become more concerned about all the racist issues that are there in the country, or are more concerned about or trying to actively fight against homophobia or racism? So what if these people have actually changed, and what if these people have taken on a new turn? So then does that mean that we still keep punishing them? Does that mean that we still don't let them get their jobs? Does that mean that we're going to make them quit their jobs and move on, and probably do something else simply because of some mistakes that they have done? Now what we need to understand is that when we're children, when we're kids, we make a lot of mistakes. That's how we learn, right? But also, what kind of mistakes are taking things too far, and how does one actually, when it comes to things like being aware, when it comes to having enough knowledge and being aware of everything that's happening, how does one actually talk about those things? So we'll be talking about all of that right here. So make sure you stay tuned. But getting back into the conversation, only a few people out there would actually defend the harmful words and actions of some of these people that have done quite racially insensitive, or even insensitive things, right? And I know not a lot of people would defend them. I mean, look, if you were asked to defend them, and you were asked to choose between defending them or calling them out for their mistake, chances are you and I would both probably not defend them at all. And this is the same with everyone who has done something wrong, okay? But the thing is, some of them haven't really done these insensitive things when they were kids. Some of them have actually done them as adults. So then at what point do we actually start penalizing people for things they did in the past, regardless of age? So what needs to be understood, or what parents need to keep in mind, especially when children love to use social media, or when children are given digital devices, is to try and make children aware about things as much as possible. Okay, because children are not really, they don't really understand some of the impacts of social media. For them, for most of us actually, when we were kids, when we first got Instagram or when we first got Facebook, it was just this app that we could connect with people. It was just this app that we could connect with people. We could share memes. We could share, our memories, right? But over time, things have actually changed. People get bullied on social media. Social media is so much more detrimental and harmful to your health than it used to be. And what I mean when I say this is that there is a lot of issues that come along with social media. Now, something we were talking about some time back as well was how social media has certain narratives, has certain stereotypes as what is perfect, and how that's affecting kids here in the United Kingdom, because they all have eating disorders, they have body disorders, and things like that, right? So obviously, social media isn't what it used to be. It's definitely so much more. It's so much more addictive, it's so much more dangerous than what it used to be. And because of that, that means that a lot of us need to take extra steps when people, or when kids we know, or when our own children are using social media. And that means that we need to educate them, that we need to tell them, look, the things you post, the things you say online could potentially damage your future. So always make sure that you think twice about what you post. Now, if anything, that's what my parents have always taught me. They've always made sure that I've thought twice about what I was saying, what I was posting. And they've always asked me to be careful with what I post, because they've made me very aware of how some of the things you post, especially if it's insensitive, it could potentially affect your whole career. It could affect your whole life, and you might not even be accepted to colleges or even jobs. When you do things that are very harmful. And we've also seen some other instances where children actually who are aware of all the racism that existed, but still went ahead and did racist things and got suspended from school, or even expelled from school and colleges, right? And a lot of this was actually, it was very, very prominent in the United States back when all these riots and everything happened. So but that doesn't mean that that isn't prominent here in the United Kingdom as well. Obviously it happens, and that is why we need to discuss it and actually find ways to actually solve this problem. So like I said, when we're dealing with children who aren't aware, who are ignorant about all these social issues, who are very ignorant about what's going on in society, it's actually the duty of older adults to make sure that these children know what they're doing, right? And they also need to make sure that these children know to as in, when they do something wrong, that they learn what they did was wrong, they take accountability for it and apologize. Because something I've noticed is when a lot of people do do wrong things on the internet, and I mean things like being very insensitive, or saying things that could potentially harm people or cause harm to people. When they do apologize, it doesn't seem too sincere. They just say, oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't aware, or I'm very sorry it happened. I was a child, but they don't really take accountability for it. Now, the first step to actually, forgiving people, or the first step to actually moving past situations that have caused, or instances that have caused a lot of harm to all these marginalized, discriminated communities out there, is actually to take accountability for your actions. And accountability is something that needs to be taught to children at a young age. It doesn't have to be when you're 18 or 20 that you finally learn accountability, because the moment you learn accountability, it doesn't matter what age you are. Because if you're really young and you learn to take responsibility for the wrong things that you do, then that means you're eventually going to be a better person, because you will then accept the fact that sometimes you can be wrong. Now, I know a lot of people have this issue of accepting their fault. They really hate to, hold themselves responsible for some of the things they do, and they try to victim blame other people when things happen, which is it's a very disturbing thing, and it's also a very unpleasant thing, because it shouldn't be hard for you to accept that you did something wrong. I understand that in this day and age, obviously, it's very hard to sort of accept your mistakes, especially, or even the fact that you're forced to sometimes accept your mistakes or accept your faults, because people are calling you out on it, and there is a lot of negative, there's a lot of pressure that is placed on you. You're pressurized a lot to make sure you apologize to everyone you offended, right? So obviously, when it comes to instances like that, it's very, very important that you learn to take accountability from a young age. So that is how you're actually going to make sure that the children of the future are better children, are better people, because they know that when they do wrong things, that they need to take responsibility for it and fix it, and even apologize for it. But make sure you stay tuned, because I'll be here in a few more minutes to actually talk to you about how to forgive and forget, and how we can make things better for everyone around us. So until then, make sure you stay tuned, because I'll be right back after this small break.
One of the easiest ways to increase your net worth is to ensure that you have higher cash flows. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to not buy things on hire purchase, not buy things over months and months because you can't afford them now, but you want it. It's kind of that delayed gratification. Rather than buy that couch, that car, that stereo, that computer, whatever item, and pay it off over 12, 24, 36 months at an interest rate, rather invest that money, make do with what you've got, and then after 12, 24, 36 months, take the money that you've now invested and buy that good. An asset could be anything that appreciates or reduces a tax bill. So it could still be a liability, but it reduces their tax bill. And I'm not going to go into the technicalities because that's out of our remit here. However, for our use or our purpose, what we are talking for the listeners here is I would put this definition of an asset forward. An asset is anything that increases your income. Anything.
Now, there's a lot of conversation around who pays more taxes, if it is the rich or if it is the poor, right? When you are basically going out during a day, if you go to a restaurant, you have to pay taxes there. If you buy a car, you have to pay taxes there. So why is it even a conversation that, the rich pay less taxes or the poor pay more taxes? Why is it a conversation like that?
Because it's true, the rich generally pay less tax. A rich person walks into a Tesco's or a Sainsbury's, they're not going to get a different bill than another person, right? They're still going to pay the same VAT on those goods. They're still going to pay the same thing. So that's all the same. However, the differences come in if you can pay yourself from your own company, you can structure it in a way that you pay less income tax through paying a bit of salary, paying dividends, and so forth, and then also deferring income. Also, your pension payments or contributions can be different. So that increases your tax sort of gap, if that, if you want to use it that way. Where a PAYE person just gets paid salary and bonus. And now those are the most highly taxed sources of income in the UK, definitely, in the UK.
Hey, it's Sarah right here on the Kaleidoscope. You're tuned into Relaks Radio, and we are talking about if we can forgive and forget, especially when we live in an age where the internet remembers everything. And obviously, I'm also talking about why we need to forgive and forget and move on from these things, especially because it's very hard to function otherwise. People make mistakes. Everyone needs to learn, but that doesn't mean we need to sort of keep punishing them forever, right? We need to let go of things as well. So that's what we're talking about. Now, if you have any thoughts, questions, opinions that you would like to share with me, make sure you text me on 078-52473-473. But let's get back into the conversation right now. Okay, so like I was telling you earlier, it's very important that children learn to accept and apologize for their behavior, especially if they do something that harms certain communities. Now, why it's important to apologize is, especially if we look at those communities that they were racist towards or they were homophobic towards, we need to understand that those communities have actually faced a lot of marginalization and discrimination. Historically, they've been marginalized a lot. They've had to go through a lot of hard times to actually get to where they are right now. So when you intentionally disrespect people who've had to struggle just to stay alive, it actually reflects on it makes you look like a really bad person, because you're completely ignoring how much of suffering and how much of struggle that they've had to go through just to get to the place where they are right now. And if we just take a look at social media for a minute, like I said before, the internet is a very scary place, and it uses these algorithms which basically tend to amplify drama and promote hateful speech and prioritize negativity. And we've seen that as well, because every time you go on social media, you'd see all these perfect people with perfect lives, and that really just makes you question if your life is perfect or if there's something wrong with you, right? And because the internet is a place like that, the internet has a lot of negativity. It's very, very hard for things to be deleted, or things to be completely erased, especially if you've already posted it, because the moment you say something insensitive, someone is going to screenshot it, someone is going to keep a record of it, and they're going to bring it back when things are working out in life for you. Okay. But what needs to be understood is that is the case in social media, but when it comes to real life, a lot of parents actually tend to intervene when their children would say things that are very insensitive or bigoted, right? And because of that, because a lot of parents tend to intervene into such situations, that sometimes that risk is reduced. But sometimes some parents don't necessarily intervene into these things, because they don't believe they are wrong. They believe that everyone has the right to say whatever they want, and say it's freedom of speech, or they aren't really racially sensitive or sensitive when it comes to issues like that in general. So then in that case, what would you do? How would you deal with an instance like that? And what needs to be kept in mind actually is the fact that when it comes to people using this whole freedom of speech excuse that they always use, it's freedom of expression. You There's actually a bunch of laws right here that say if what you're saying is offensive, if it hurts people, if it causes harm to people, that it's not actually your freedom of speech. It can actually be limited if it causes harm to people. So So then, in that case, you need to understand that saying things that are offensive, saying things that hurt a lot of people, isn't going to help you, and it isn't going to help your future either. But we'll also talk about how the internet has evolved, or rather, devolved into a place that simultaneously normalizes invectives, but also demands moral purity, and it is a very unforgiving place out there. So if you're one of those people who don't think twice about what you're putting out on social media, what you're tweeting or what you're saying, just really make sure you double check and do what you're doing. Also, make sure you're aware of these things. Look, if you're 15, 16, 17, that is really no excuse for you to say, oh, I didn't know that it existed, because there are so many resources available out there for you to educate yourself, to make yourself aware. And when I was at that age, I was very informed on these things, and it's very, it doesn't hurt for you to be informed about these things as well. It's very normal, and that is something that we should do, because we need to remember that our parents or older people aren't always going to be there to sort of supervise us and tell us what to do. At some point in our lives, we need to start making independent decisions, and for us to obviously do that, we need to make sure that the people we live with, or we ourselves, know what to do, and how to educate ourselves. So what exactly do we do when when children say such things? How do we call out this hate speech how do we call out hate speech that is made by children, and how do we make sure we don't have this culture of constraint for children? Okay, so we need to understand that nobody ever wants to hear anyone say offensive things online, regardless of whether you're a child or whether you're an adult. No one wants to hear things that might be, that might disrespect some of the struggles they've had, some of the problems that they've had to go through, especially if they are a part of a marginalized or discriminated community. But at the same time, we also need to figure out what to actually do when that happens, and how we can actually prevent that from happening. So we need to teach our kids, or or the children we associate, a new set of skills actually that establish public policy, and perhaps some form of law to actually create some sort of social contract between these kids. Okay, so kids understand that they can't say things that are harmful, because it might eventually end up with a lot of consequences for them as well. So that's why we need to sort of create this we need to sort of create this mindset. We need to create an environment where children understand that the things they do have consequences, and that they can be punished for, or even reprimanded for it. So a lot of people question as to whether what children post online and what others post about their children should actually follow them into adulthood and affect things like their academic and vocational careers. And especially given the fact a lot of tech companies out there, like a lot of tech companies use a lot of these apps like the messenger, or the Facebook's Messenger Kids, or even Instagram has this chat option, because they make profit, or they maximize the use of these apps. Children go online at an even younger age than we used to. When I first got social media, I was probably 14 or 15. But that's not the case with children nowadays. When children nowadays actually get social media when they're 9, 10, 11 years old, which is really, really small, because at that age, I was playing with toys. I wasn't playing with my phone. And also because, back then things weren't so, developed as it is right now. But the thing is, because a lot of children spend a lot of time on social media, because a lot of companies also maximize on the profit that they can get from this. There's also this huge question of whether we can actually, or rather whether we should let the things that they say when their children follow them into adulthood. Now, a whole lot of things that you say on the internet can sometimes even be taken out of context. Sometimes it's not even accurate. Sometimes you said something different, but they've completely taken it out of context and twisted it. That's what the internet does. They take a lot of things out of context. But sometimes when you do those things, they actually follow you when you're an adult as well. And something that the former Google's CEO said was that once young people have actually become adults, they have the automatic right to change their names upon adulthood and to gain distance from their online past. But according to some research that was conducted by the education company Kaplan, they've actually found that 36% of college college admission counselors use social media profiles when they're making decisions about applicants, and 58% reported that what they had found were actually quite negative. So we understand that when children do these things, there are a lot of ripple effects of derogatory language that can be very long and very deep, and can be especially hard to get past. Okay, and also we've seen how when we're talking about hateful speech, when we're talking about insensitive things that children have done, there is a lot of negative effects on students' academic lives and their performance, and it has also lowered their self-esteem, and made them able, or haven't really made them able to focus as much as they used to. And I'm talking about kids from kids they bully or kids they say things about, right? So when it comes to things like that, obviously there is a lot of questions that we need to talk about. There are so many different things that adults need to consider when they're giving children social media, and also in terms of what exactly they're saying and what exactly they're teaching their children when they're growing up. Now, another thing is, like I said earlier, we need to start teaching kids accountability, because if not, as when they grow up, they won't take responsibility for some of the stuff they did. So it's always good to teach your kids accountability and responsibility at a young age, so they know that everything they do and everything they say has consequences, and that also acts as a way, or that also acts as a deterrent from them saying some of the very insensitive content or insensitive things that they say online. Okay, stay tuned, because I'll be back in a few more minutes and we'll continue talking about this. But until then, it's time for me to actually hit into a small break. Hey, it's your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. Welcome to the Kaleidoscope, and this is the final of my show, the final few minutes actually. And we were just talking about how if we can actually forgive and forget some of the things, some of the mistakes that children make when they're children, especially things that are related to very insensitive things some people say online. So that's what we were talking about. But so let's get right into it. Actually, now when you're an adolescent, when you're a teenager, it's a time when you're very influenced by other people. That you have a lot of influence out there. So many people are you associate so many people, so you're influenced by different things. Your peer group's different, the intent, or rather the content you see on the internet are different, so obviously we're all influenced by a lot of those. So when we were small, when we were teenagers, everything we did and said wasn't really public and permanent. But the thing is, right now it is, because a lot of these kids, a lot of these children spend so much time on the internet, and the internet is a place where everything is recorded. And there are so many questions that we have about, at what point does it actually make it, is it actually okay for people to start recording other people's lives on the internet? And because the internet is some place that keeps track of everything that you do, especially place like Twitter. If you just go and type someone's Twitter handle, you can see all the tweets they've posted, right? And that way you can actually see how they might have posted content that is that might be insensitive. And if that's the case, then that means that could possibly result in a time, it result in them losing their jobs, losing their careers, and even losing the ability to go to college. So obviously, when it comes to things like that, it's very, very important that we focus on at what age we need to keep recording these things, what age is fine for children to make mistakes, and at what point we can actually let go of these things, right? Now, right here in Europe, there's something called the right to be forgotten, which is basically a right where you can ask for erasure from all your online presence that don't really that aren't really who you are right now. So they can actually petition data companies to unlink themselves, or to unlink them in search engines, and even from things that they've posted themselves, from information that is actually no longer relevant to their reputation. But sometimes we tend to keep track of some of the things they've done, and those things are very, very important when they're applying to college or their careers. Now, I'm talking about things like juvenile criminal records, right? Because depending on the severity of the crime they've done, the age of the defendant and other factors, we tend to still keep track of these things. But we also recognize in many, many contexts that kids are unique, and they're and sometimes have special needs based on their immaturity, their developmental status, and even their inability to give consent. And we need to understand that even if what they did when they were children were wrong, for example, take Alexei McCammon. If what she did, if not if, but basically what she did was actually harmful and it was hurtful. But the thing is, at that point, is when you learn. You need to sometimes make these mistakes. You need to be able to distinguish right from wrong and acceptable from unacceptable to actually grow up. And you need to you need to make mistakes to learn from them. And these are huge parts of growing up, because figuring out who you are can involve a lot of experimentation. It can involve a lot of exploration, and you will constantly have to compare yourselves to others. And because that is how confusing those times are, sometimes it leads to you making really bad decisions. And sometimes those bad decisions that you make has a huge impact on your life. Especially, like I said, because we live in a stage where everyone keeps track of everything, where people don't people pay attention to everything that you post online. And because it's recorded everywhere you post, or it's recorded on all your social media, if people search up for you, because those things happen, it's very, very important that we sort of learn to not hold or not to keep punishing people forever because of what they do. Because at one point we're all kids, we all made certain mistakes. We all might have said something that was racist. We might have said something that was sexist or homophobic, because sometimes people around you say it. Sometimes a lot of these influences that people you're influenced by say it, so then unknowingly sometimes you tend to say these things and you tend to hurt people, right? But at the same time, we need to understand that it's very, very important that we hold children accountable for what they say. It's very important that we make sure that children are aware, or children make sure they know and they learn once they do a mistake, because it's ultimately up to the parents and it's ultimately up to themselves as well to accept accountability and responsibility for their mistakes and learn from their mistakes and become better adults. So there's a part of growing up. It's very hard to let go of things when everything is recorded everywhere, when you can just search up someone's name and you can literally find everything they've ever said their entire life on the internet. So moving forward, obviously, we need to keep all of these things in mind. We need to make sure we learn to forgive people for things they've done as children, and also to move forward while making sure we educate and make our children and younger kids nowadays as well so much more accountable. It's time for me to head out of here, and I really, really hope you have a good day. But don't worry, because Jamie will be here on the chat trap to talk about all things positive, motivational, and everything that will help you during the pandemic. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But I'm going to head out of here, and I hope you have a really, really good day.